Hello everyone, I'm Rancho, and this episode of Soundtrack Net Cafe is gonna be a fun one about Koei Tecmo's Warrior series, so get...
Stupid Doppelgänger season.
Did you have to shoot both Eddies?
Only way to be sure. Ooh, but we can work with these notes. Welcome to the I Can't Believe It's Not Musou episode of Music Arcade. Hello everyone, welcome to the Music Arcade. I'm Galen the Sub Guy Firestone.
And I'm Ranako, actually with a goatee.
Wait, really? You grew out your hair, or am I just not getting the joke? That was a Mirror Universe joke, wasn't it?
I actually have been growing a goatee, not for this episode, but it is a perfect match for the joke.
The timing worked. The way you said it, I'm like, is joke or not? Yeah, okay. I'm not as awake as I'd like either. I'm actually pretty exhausted from the last few days.
Is joke, but also truth.
The best kind of joke.
I know, right?
On the subject of not quite truth, we're going to talk about things that aren't quite Musou games. So,
yeah, Musou once again being a fallback topic because Eddie can't be with us this episode. So let's talk about games that are Musou in genre, but not Koei Tecmo developed games.
Correct, and there was actually some discussion about this. Apparently, Fate Samurai Remnant is so different that, Rana, you thought it was actually a qualifier for this one.
Yeah, exactly.
So, good on Koei for branching out, but, no, that one is... Yeah.
They really managed to make some different and interesting spin-offs. But turns out they're not the only one that play with the formula they popularized.
Weirdly enough, I actually would have qualified, even though it was technically Koei published, I would have qualified Warriors Legends of Troy for this. Because,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they were made by a Canadian studio. It was extremely different from any other Warriors game before or since.
And Achilles was super fun to play in Orochi 3.
He was. But we didn't end up going that way. We did some more generally, recognizable Musous, but the first one on the list is a Sega Genesis game which predates Musou, Gauntlet IV. Please explain yourself.
Well, I wanted something that predated Dynasty Warriors 2 because I refuse to believe that they invented out of nothingness the idea of hitting a lot of people.
Yeah, but
this doesn't feel like something that couldn't exist before 2000, even on a different level. Now, obviously, my mind on Ancestors first went to beat 'em ups, which are the more direct comparison points.
Absolutely.
But as much as I will take any excuse to sneak in a Turtles in Time track in there, this didn't feel like there was a musical line that was drawn, because beat 'em up are too much their own thing to be interesting in a music discussion point of view in this topic specifically. And so I kept on racking my brain a little more. And landed on one of the most defining aspects of the Musou games, which is that there's a lot of mooks to hit. And remembered that one of the first series that used the sheer amount and volume of enemies on screen as a sales point to be the Gauntlet series.
Now, here's my response to that, which I've been trying to worm my way in to talk about during your speech. I would argue against the notion that Musou is defined solely by the number of enemies. Certainly that's a key factor of it, but there's a lot more going on to it, and having it described as tactical action makes more sense. In most Musou games worth anything, there's a not insignificant amount of real-time strategy component going on in there, usually involving rescuing allied officers or completing objectives during the stage. So I would I would describe Musou as more than just one versus army.
it's very much more than one versus that army. And to be clear, I don't mean that it's the only relevant factor. It's just one that felt preeminent, and that's the direction my mind went. But we can certainly trace other ancestries, especially when it comes to Koei Tecmo's own production, with the fact that it's at heart a spin-off of a strategy game series.
Yeah, and that shows a lot, as I just described.
Yeah, and I didn't want for this episode to go in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms soundtrack route, or the Nobunaga's Ambition soundtrack route.
Yeah,
I felt fancy like that.
That's fine.
Especially since I landed on what I think is an interesting conversation point.
Because, this is a very cool song.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Gauntlet IV soundtrack is a wonderful piece of work by Masaharu Iwata and Hitoshi Sakimoto.
Oh, really?
Especially the latter, the latter being a composer I'm growing to like more and more as we talk about his work in these episodes.
I've always liked Sakimoto, but please go on.
Yeah, me too, but the range of his work is only dawning on me over the course of talking about his works, yeah.
That's fair. It's always fun to discover something. We'll be talking about a composer later who has a surprisingly limited range, as I'm discovering. So kind of the opposite effect of this.
And I will talk about another composer I didn't quite expect or kind of forgot was there. So, yay for more composer talk.
Yay!
But anyway, when it comes to the Gauntlet IV soundtrack, the track itself is March in the Dark, which is the theme for the water tower in quest mode. That was one of the big additions in Gauntlet, which is that they had a mode that was less arcadey and more about going through 4 elemental towers to eventually unlock the final one, instead of it being one single huge maze.
I wouldn't have called this as a water song, honestly. That's kind of a surprise to me.
I do find the water themes in how it rises and lowers eventually, but I do agree that this is not as preeminent as, for instance, the wind tower, which is much more clearly wind theme. This one and the fire one are more subtle in their elemental influences. Then again, it doesn't help that the Genesis sound chip has this very distinct sound to it that kind of grabs the attention, especially today. Imagine it was more easy to look or listen past it at the time.
Yeah.
But more than a water song, it's a dungeoneering song, but one that drives the action forward, and that's kind of the main conclusion I draw from this track as an ancestor in the genre. It's that the themes are driven by 2 elements that we still find to this day, which are place and pace. It's not story-driven most of the time, but instead the tracks are more, here's your stage, here's how fast and how hard you're going to hit everyone in the face. Now go. At least that's how I choose to interpret this legacy.
I mean, I have a hard time arguing with it. There's no denying that the Gauntlet franchise is, a giant pile of enemies, generally speaking.
Absolutely. They had to figure out a tech to make such a pile of enemies viable in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a selling point of the early Dynasty Warriors, the amount of enemies you can put on screen and still have the game run smoothly. Unless you're playing on the Switch, of course.
Unless you're playing on the Switch.
Had to.
If you didn't, I would have.
Oh, yeah. But I did misspoke about the fact that this was a talking point, because I'd argue that this is still an element they're using as a selling point for Dynasty Warriors Origins that released a month ago.
Yeah, I've been slowly playing through that one, and it's been quite a fun time. I have complaints about it, though. It's not as perfect as some people are saying, but it is largely very good and a great return to form after the disaster that was 9.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and we'll be hearing more about that, no doubt, in No Playing.
Indeed.
But for now, let's move on to the next track in the series and talk about some 99 Nights.
This is a franchise that I wanted to actually do something good, and they've never managed to succeed it.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah, I have a very low opinion of this franchise, despite it entirely being wasted potential, because there was something really cool here that they just did not land. The first 99 Nights...
I'll admit, I'm not the most knowledgeable about 99 Nights. Oh, I should say, by the way, as a full disclaimer, I'm not that familiar with Gauntlet as well. I know of it, I've watched like speedruns of it, but I haven't really played the series that much, so some details might be, as ever, slightly incorrect.
Fair enough.
But for 99 Nights, I know even less.
Well, I did play it. In fact, it was the game that caused my red ring of death on my first Xbox 360. Remember where that used to happen?
Oh, wonderful.
Yep. This was a game that was almost good. And it was almost good in the worst possible way. The characters were fun, but totally unbalanced in a bad way. The leveling was jank. The levels had the potential to be cool, but couldn't really dial it in. The music mixing was a disaster. Imagine this, if you will. Imagine this, if you will. You have this big, sprawling map with little hidden nooks and crannies where you can find treasures, which you are going to need for your characters.
Sounds good so far.
Right. The music only comes in when you start fighting something, plays to completion.
What?
Yep. So...
Why?
Good question. Ask Konami. I have no idea. So I'm going through the mountain area where this place is. I beat up this group of enemies. The music's still playing even though the enemies are gone. I go down a corridor that has no enemies in it. The music stops, and then there's no music. I go down to the corridor, get the treasure, still no enemies, run back in complete silence, fight some more enemies, the song starts again.
That's stupid.
Yes! This game had issues.
I can see that.
The quality of the soundtrack, however, is actually quite high. I like the soundtrack to listen to quite a bit.
Oh,
so much so that my principal story about this song doesn't even come from the game.
Go on.
So, once upon a time, I was an aspiring professional writer, among my many other things. And I was writing a spec script with the intent to sell, and it was a science fiction script.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed some inspiration. So I put this song on repeat.
Oh.
And I wrote an entire 45-minute episode listening solely to this song.
That's impressive, given that the track has 3 very distinct movements, and each of them feels very repetitive in their own niche. So,
as weird as it is, it was just that grind mindset that just sort of worked for me on that day.
Yeah, I guess this song of repeat would feel like 3 short songs on repeat again and again.
Yeah. I wish this song made any sense for the game, the way that music worked. I explained the engine there.
Sometimes you need to get in the zone.
Sometimes you need to get in the zone. This particular composer, Shingo Yasumoto, one of those, this guy has that problem. He tends to do, like, really repetitive movements, like you said.
Yeah.
I don't mind
Not the most repetitive track of the episode, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. This one does have the, this one does have variations on a theme. It does, like, grow. It's very much trying to be almost a bolero.
Yeah.
So it's not, like, tedious.
Exactly.
Yeah, this guy did 2 songs for this soundtrack. This one, another song called Hammerfall, which is very similar. I just don't have the attempted TV script story about Hammerfall, so...
Of course. That's a better story. And, yeah, overall, it's got a kind of a popcorn action vibe, where things are serious in universe, but in a light-hearted tone as a game, kinda.
Which doesn't fit the game's tone at all, I might add. This game took itself way too seriously.
It's strange.
Yeah,
It's like you had all the good ingredients and decided to make the worst possible use of them.
Yes, thank you. That is exactly what I've been trying to say for like 20 years. Yes.
You're welcome. Food analogies to the rescue once again.
Cheers. I've been trying to put this together because I keep like, there's so much here that almost works. And they just drop the ball so hard.
It's crazy.
And then, this is a bit of a tangent, but I have a very funny story about the second game.
Mm-hmm.
So the second game did better. Like, it was a better video game. It was a lot more generic, however, as a result.
Good. Learning happened.
Learning happened. But, so I was playing the demo of the game.
Yeah.
And I noticed the demo's main character was named Galen.
Aha.
And I thought, for the longest time, that it was just taking my Xbox handle and porting it onto this main character.
That's not what it does, is it?
No, the character's name was actually Galen, and voiced by a guy doing the worst Troy Baker impression I'd ever heard, and that guy is an actor by the name of Troy Baker. They learned some lessons. They didn't learn enough of them.
Incredible.
Yeah, Steve Bloom was also doing a really bad Steve Bloom impression on that voice track. 99 Nights 2 was a technically better game than 99 Nights 1, but I have a hard time going to bat for either of them. They are a historical curiosity more than anything else, I would say.
It almost feels like they went... completely ignored that Warriors games existed, took action games, expanded them, and thought, good enough, ship it.
Yes. Oh my god, yes. Somehow, without having played this game, you have managed to lock in completely on how this franchise functions.
I just had you to some streams I've been watching, a lot of weird PS2 action games on the mind, and that's what got in there, because there are a lot of those.
There are. Late PS2 was kind of a Wild West of actioners, of 3D actioners.
Yeah, exactly. Before the PS3 really made the Medal of Honor and Colors of Duties really take the forefront and take the crown, sort of.
Yup. And what better time to move over to a very, very, very weird PS3 game?
Yeah, because as far as studios that do their thing, Marvelous certainly does their thing.
Marvelous certainly does their thing.
Their thing is bouncing titties and shorts outfits.
Look. I wish I could deny this.
Yeah.
The Senran Kagura games are very fan servicey.
Yes.
There is also, however, a good Musou game in there. At least for the versus games. Like, I actually did enjoy them as video games. I need to be clear on this.
Yeah, like, my main issue with the one Senran Kagura game I played, which was on the 3DS, was that it was not a great game.
No.
It played badly, it had terrible frame rate, and it was kind of dull and repetitive.
Which is why they remade one of them. They didn't do the second one, but they did the first one in the Versus engine, and it was good. It was good.
Yeah. And if they're making a good game, you put the characters you want. I'm not one that's bothered by these sort of things.
Yeah.
And this one, Estival Versus, seems to be one of the better entries, honestly.
Yeah. This was the first one that I played. And I played it because I watched former achievement hunter turned mega streamer Ray Narvaez Jr., aka Brown Man. I watched him play it on his stream.
Aha.
And I'm like, oh, this is actually good? The advertising I've seen is just boobs, 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 boobs. But
to no small part to the publisher themselves.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, fan service is a major selling point. This isn't like DOA where it has an identity crisis.
Yeah.
This knows what it is.
Absolutely. It just so happens to also be an enjoyable Musou-like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Probably one of the best recreation of the formula, honestly.
I have a hard time disagreeing with that. The only one that I would say is better is also by Marvelous, and we're going to talk about that one next.
Yeah.
So, Marvelous understood the assignment.
They certainly do. They when they get around to it and when they rely on more than just the fan service they have on their hand to make fun video games, they can make some very enjoyable experiences.
Absolutely.
They're such a 50-50 publisher, you know?
They are.
It's hard to know what you're gonna get before you have the pad in your hand and you are in the game.
Yeah.
Even just looking at it, sometimes it's hard to be sure.
Yeah, yeah. But,
And as far as this game goes and this game's soundtrack goes, I started with Scorching Volcano because it feels the best application of the fact that it understood the assignment of sounding like a Warriors game the best.
Oh yeah, no, I flat out said in my notes, it reminds me of Samurai Warriors 2 Extreme Legends. Like, if you put the song in that game, I would not even blink.
Yeah, I even know the exact stage it would go, because there's a Volcano stage on... what's the...
Kyushu.
Island... right. Where the Tachibana clan is.
Yes, Kyushu. I knew exactly what you were going for the second you said it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Because that's how clear it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the song is just really cool as a song.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got the guitar versus the shamisen versus the synths.
It's good action.
Yeah. There's a short, really cool guitar solo.
Yeah. It really does the job very well, and I felt compelled to pull in another song, which was
I believe it was the Pancake
Amusement Park one.
Yeah. My exact notes on this are Bouncy, the song, not the game, I mean.
I mean both.
I mean, yes, both, but in this case, the song is quite bouncy.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the other songs are very much about the theming and the stages more than just trying to sound like a Warriors game. And I felt if I didn't bring that song up, it would misrepresent the game's soundtrack, which is mostly about the beach vacation feeling to it.
Yeah. One thing that surprised me about Estival Versus is that the later you get in the story, the more, like, serious it becomes in a good way. Like, I'm like, wait, when did I start caring about these characters?
I admit I didn't go as far as to get to that point. Didn't finish the game. I just started playing a few stages. But I can definitely see that happening. Like, no matter what the character looks like, if you write them in a fun, interesting way and give enough time with them, people are gonna care.
Yeah. Although, I need to kind of shout this out. Remember how you said Marvelous is a really 50-50 publisher?
Yeah.
So, a big chunk of the story of Estival Versus surrounds a character who is dead.
Uh-huh.
And the main crux of the story ends up being coming to terms with this dead character's death. Again, because she's a ghost around here now.
Oh, I see.
A very bouncy ghost, because this is still Senran Kagura.
Well, of course.
But because Marvelous apparently decides that their budget for this franchise is limited to $5 and a stack of Playboys, reuse assets a lot.
Yeah.
And that means this dead character, despite all of the emotional catharsis, just keeps coming back. They're like, we have her model in animations, we're just gonna keep using her. So it totally undermines the ending of this game, just by like, alright, she's just here again now. Is she actually dead? It gets to the point where in the Musou, it gets to the point where in the Gacha mobile game, which no, I've never played, they have her doing like mundane jobs because they just don't want to get rid of her that hard. Like, oh, the ghost is working at a maid cafe now. Sure, why not? That's normal.
All right, sure. I mean, imagine having a story where you have somebody that's dead and you just bring them back next episode. Couldn't be us. Shoutouts to Eddie.
It's almost weird that I feel better defending Senran Kagura than I do Dead or Alive at this point, just because Senran Kagura doesn't have an identity crisis. Meanwhile, Dead or Alive is like, it doesn't know what it wants to be, and I sometimes feel bad defending it as a result.
Yeah, like, I honestly respect a lot Dead or Alive as a game. I've played it a bit more recently and had tremendous amount of fun with it.
Yeah, the actual game is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I remember for 2 mainline games in a row, and I'm even just talking about the mainline games, they started going with real fighting games, and we're going to talk about fighting game stuff. And like 2 months after release, with fan service, and like, I'm fine with both. I'm fine with either individually as well. Just pick a lane, any lane, and have a bit of direction, please.
Because it's like, you have them ultra serious in Ninja Gaiden, to the point where in Warriors All-Stars, Ayane was explicitly called a Ninja Gaiden character, because that was the incarnation they went with. You have the middle-of-the-road, schizophrenic Dead or Alive, and then you have the super fan service beach volleyball, and then their gachas, which, again, how do you not have an AO label? Like, I understand why you're not released in the West. Like, what the hell? This is literally just softcore at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just like, what is happening here? This is not a franchise that has a direction.
Also, I don't even know if you are aware, I'd imagine you are, but they went one step further recently. They released a new game.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, because all of that vacation sim and island management kind of got in the way of some aspect they wanted to go to. So there's one game they released recently or are going to release with a smaller cast of just 6 characters. Standalone game, so no live service, thankfully.
Okay.
And it's just a dating sim.
I hate it, but I wish I could say I was surprised.
Yeah.
It seemed like the natural evolution of that side of the franchise.
Exactly. I will grant them that they picked a lane, at least for this one.
Sure.
Not the lane I'd have preferred, but at least this one seems to know what it is.
I mean, at some point they're going to maybe make another actual DOA fighter.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have no doubt they're going to return to that with the power of the infinity money they're making with their fanservice games behind it.
Yeah, and then, you know, Kasumi is still one of my favorite characters in Warriors Undertale 3 Ultimate. Like, she's so good.
Of course.
It's like, this is, it's, Okay, anyway, we're back on this topic again.
Now then, how about we go from one game from Marvelous to another? And actually, I thought this was, for a time, a Koei Tecmo one, but actually it isn't, but the sequel is. Anyway, Fate Extella.
Yeah, so Fate Extella Link, to be clear, this is the second Fate Extella game, not the first one. Remember how we were just talking about how Marvelous is a 50-50 publisher? The first Fate Extella was made for the PSP, ported to PlayStation 3 or 4. I think I played it on 4, and it was okay. It was okay. This one was made for consoles in mind and actually feels a lot more like a Musou game as a result.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, the PSP was a powerful little beast, but...
Oh, yeah.
It does limit some of the ambitions of what you can do with it.
It does, and Marvelous was not as capable of handling that as Square Enix was because, you know, if you're going to compare late PlayStation console releases that started on PSP, the obvious one is Type 0, and Type 0, for better or worse, came out a lot better as a console game than Fate Extella, the first one, did. Fate Extella Link, on the other hand, great game. Solid. I would go to bat for this one in a heartbeat.
Wonderful to hear.
One of the interesting things about Fate Extella Link, however, is the composer.
Tell me more.
Mo Naka.
Aha.
So yes, we are listening to one of my all-time favorites right now, Keiichi Okabe. Not that I had any idea of this while I was actually playing the game. I got hoodwinked by this in the credits.
In my notes, to contrast with the previous one that I said, focus musically on the situation and the theme over the action and the drama, this is where all of the drama from the previous track went, and then some.
Yeah. This is...
It's a bit busy at times, but it plays by rule of cool, and I'm into it.
Yeah.
It feels almost like the variation of a more grounded theme, except you're in some sort of super mode.
Which is weird, because I think the song... Did I pick Last Stand? I think that's what I picked.
You picked All Out Attack.
All Out Attack. Never mind. Maybe that is what's going on. No, they took out the super modes in Link. The super modes were only a thing in the first Fate Extella. Anyway. Yeah, no, it's... I mean, it's decent, I guess. Musically, this song is very okay, but it does kind of show, again, that they understood the assignment. Marvelous knows how to make a decent Musou game. They're really the only company other than Koei that does. You know what I was expecting to see? And I've always been curious about this game as a result of this. I know somehow, some way, one of the Guilty Gear spin-offs became an action game that was not dissimilar to Musou.
Less of an action game and more an outright strategy game.
Aha!
And that is Guilty Gear 2.
But failing that, we have Marvelous, again, doing a good job. Now, this is a much less fan-servicey game, despite being spawned from Fate, which is a very fan-servicey franchise.
Yeah, this one feels like it's for the people that like plot with their action.
Yeah, honestly. In fact, I would go so far as to say Fate Extella Link is probably my all-time favorite non-Koei Musou game.
I can definitely see that. And
that said,
honestly, I was kind of surprised over the course of the research by how much of the genre is actually Koei doing what they do best. Like, I knew they had, obviously they popularized the genre, they're doing some spin-offs. I didn't realize how much of a percentage they had. Like, it feels like 80% of the genre is just them.
Yeah, that is accurate. They kind of control the market, and they kind of
that's kind of why I went with some weirder picks and entries for this episode, because I had trouble finding games that weren't by them, which was the assignment.
Yeah, I understand that. I at least understand. I've played enough clones. I am that much of a fanboy of this genre that I've played enough clones that I actually was like, all three of these games I've actually played, plus one of yours, plus two of yours. In fact, the only game on here I haven't played is Gauntlet IV.
Yeah. You've played more of my games than I have.
That's amazing. So I guess I was more well prepared for this just by virtue of, and I had games I left on the table. I remember, Undead Knights was another one. That was also a PSP game.
Never played it.
A Musou. Yeah, that was one where half of the soundtrack was done by a black metal band.
Ooh. Interesting.
There were a couple others in and out of there. Brutal Legend, I think I would have accepted. That one's Musou adjacent enough that I'm like, I can see this one working.
With more of an emphasis on the strategic element,
Yeah. But, I mean, as I explained, I do find those strategy elements to be core to the Musou experience, which is why, let's say you're in Devil May Cry 4 Special, and you set enemy spawning to maximum, you're going to get Dynasty Warriors numbers of enemies, but my brain is not going to call that one a Musou.
It's a lot of elements, as it turns out, and like, the way I thought of it wasn't even the strategic aspect more than the stages, which are very sprawling and objective-based.
Yes. Now, on the subject of sprawling stages and barely a Musou... No, not even barely a Musou. This was pretty clearly a Musou back then. It stopped being so by the third game.
Yeah, like, I can see the comparison that's possible between this game and Dynasty Warriors 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the sequels, or even the sequels on the Dynasty Warriors side, they went completely different ways.
Oh, they absolutely did. Plus, it's only fair that we talked about Keiichi Okabe without Taro Yoko. Now we get to talk about Taro Yoko without Keiichi Okabe.
Exactly. And with some Drakengard, namely the ground level theme from Chapter 3.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, Takayuki Aihara, which is the composer, he can do tracks that don't sound like the kind of thing you'd pipe in as part of a sleep deprivation torture.
That is a good description for this song.
Yeah. He worked on Soul Age. He made Bravely Folk Song. I love Bravely Folk Song. This one I respect begrudgingly.
I'm a little more than begrudging. My exact notes are, it's not a quote-unquote good song, but it probably sounds amazing to heighten tension in the moment.
It's exactly what it sets out to do, and that's kind of my point by emphasizing, before even talking about the song much, that it can do other stuff, vastly different stuff, very musical stuff. To this day still, this wasn't the assignment. Here, the goal is to do something as light and fluffy as a rusting Soviet weapons warehouse.
Yeah, Taro Yoko wanted to completely deconstruct Musou's.
Yeah, and that feels like a deconstruction.
Yep.
It's Warrior's cool actions, edgy, brutal cousin. It's dirty work, it feels like an anxiety and panic attack, which is even funnier on this specific track because of a comparison that done during the research. Because this jackhammer of a song sounded eerily familiar as well, which I probably wouldn't have picked on if I had played more of the game. I played Drakengard III and Nier Automata, which is its 8th anniversary today, and I'm old. But I haven't played much of Drakengard itself. Yet this song felt familiar, and by mentally accelerating it, I realized that this sounded like the news, namely the French news show on one specific channel that had variation on a jingle since 1990, and it sounds like this song but sped up.
I know that the first Drakengard used a lot of that. It was a lot of corrupted classical themes and samples.
Yes.
They stopped doing that as of the second game.
I believe there are some. I don't believe this was actually an inspiration, just that it felt funny, if nothing else, that this anxiety-inducing song sounds the same as the news, the most anxiety-inducing show there is around.
Well, again, this composer knows the assignment. They understood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, my history with Drakengard is weird. I played the game originally because I saw a commercial on MTV. Like, they actually had a TV spot.
Wow.
I played it, and I hated it. I despised this game. I got to the endings, and I'm like, this is making me angry. And then,
that makes sense.
On a whim, down the road, I played Drakengard 2.
Yeah.
Which is an inferior game, though the gameplay is superior. The game itself is not. And literally at the end of that, the actual ending was so over-the-top happy ending, like, how did we get here, that I'm like, oh, I now understand the first game. I get what they were trying to say because this game dropped the ball on it so hard.
Incredible.
So that gave me a completely new reappreciation for the first Drakengard, and then Nier 1 happened, and that was the end of that. I was a Taro Yoko fanboy for the rest of my days.
Oh yeah, like, it... As someone who was aware of the work of Kavya at the time, like, I became aware of them at the release of Drakengard 2, I think. And being trolled by Kavya was a saying at the time. And yeah, and I still think seeing Taro Yoko go from obscure weirdness monger to one of the biggest names out there after Square Enix decided, fine, we're going to give you a normal budget once, and it paid off.
Well, that normal budget once mostly went to Platinum Games, if we're being completely honest, but
exactly,
given that they made one of the all-time modern classics as a result, like, yeah.
It's crazy how things work, and that kind of stuff is why you want a healthy AA scene in your big tent studio. You want to maintain the mid-card, to speak in wrestling terms. Your promotion is only ever as good as your mid-card.
That is an interesting... Like, I wasn't expecting the wrestling take, but I kind of love it.
Oh yeah. That's such a good parallel that lives rent-free in my head.
I get why.
Like, I love indies. Indies are for nerds. But to make something that doesn't stagnate, you have to take up and foster the roots, even if it means taking some mild risk on some interesting projects. And I have nothing but respect for the studios that kind of rediscovered this formula in the last 2-3 years. There's been a bit of a return to form in that department, and I want to see more of that. But we are drifting off in the conversation, so since we are mostly done on talking about this repetitive track, how about we talk about probably the cloniest clone when it comes to Musou clones?
Which is funny, because actually it doesn't play... It plays more like Devil May Cry. This was on, like, I think the Devil May Cry 2 engine.
Yeah, and yet, given the setting, you can't deny that it has more proximity than any other game.
I mean, yeah, obviously. Sengoku Basara, Samurai Heroes, specifically the third one, because that's the only one I've played, because I think is like the only one other than Devil Kings, which... oh boy, that actually made it to U.S. shores.
I'm very glad that because of very recent re-reviews, I understand what you mean. Namely because one critic that hated Origins decided to review again Sengoku Basara out of spite.
Hated Origins, but review... Interesting.
Because of the tone. They didn't appreciate the switch to a more serious tone, didn't like the protagonist, etc., etc.
I agree with not like the protagonist, but this isn't the first time Dynasty Warriors has done this. They did this at 7. I'm going out of... Okay, I'm getting off of this topic before. Sengoku Basara. I'll
send you a link or two once we're done with that.
Sure. Sengoku Basara is a weird take on the game. It does not care about being realistic. At all.
Oh, it really doesn't.
No. You want to talk about not taking itself seriously, this is about as far as it gets. There are serious characters, of course. Mitsunari is played as an unhinged maniac, voiced by Troy Baker. Yeah. Not doing a bad Troy Baker impression this time.
Exactly. He's hamming it up.
Oh, yeah. Everyone is. They're having a great time. Magoichi Saika is, instead of a dude with a rifle, is a hot redhead with a whole arsenal of heavy weapons. Heavy firearm weapons. Like, she doesn't play like anyone else because she plays like a third-person shooter. You got your third-person shooter in my Musou game. That said, I've always had
that kind of thing is kind of why I want some... different eyes and different hands in the formula, because as much as Koei Tecmo is honestly pretty great at doing variations on the theme and on finding different places to take the series and the gameplay, most prominently in Persona 5 Scramble, having a different take in the first place is just the best way to kind of find how to vary things, how to give a different breath of fresh air in the genre.
We're seeing that happen in real time with Civ 7.
Oh, like, yeah, absolutely.
Having that competition and being able to trade ideas between them and variations on the theme has made that a fundamentally different and evolved game, which I think is good. I think purists are complaining, because they're always going to complain, but those are the same purists who say the franchise has sucked since 4.
Exactly. And I think the take that Civ 7 is a copy of Humankind because they have a similar mechanic is stupid. But I think at the same time that Civ 7 wouldn't be the game it is if Humankind didn't exist.
Yeah, Humankind, there's Millennia DNA in there as well.
Exactly.
Which is good, you know, competition breeds innovation.
The genre is richer the more difference it fosters.
Yeah. So I definitely agree there. I have, however, always had a soft spot for the Samurai Heroes soundtrack. Something about the way this game sounds just has clicked with me on a very fundamental level.
Oh yeah, and that track is absolutely lovely. It's a stylish action twist of the Warriors rock styling, but with a more arcade vibe to it.
Yeah. Like one of the interesting
sounds of the video gamey sounds add this arcade aspect, and I love that.
One of the interesting things about the way this soundtrack works is what we're hearing right now is both a boss theme and a stage theme.
Interesting.
Because every character gets their own boss theme in certain stages as stage music.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, so you hear this primarily when you're fighting Kotaro, but when you're playing as him, you also get this music.
Ah.
Not all the time, but which is good because, yeah.
And again, that's a different use of music than the Warriors mainline series does.
A little bit. Lubu does this a lot, actually.
Yeah, but he's Lubu. He's allowed to break a few rules.
Ha!
Who's gonna tell him?
That's a good point. But, yeah, funny enough, remember that story I told about 99 Nights earlier, how I used this to write a script?
Yeah?
I have that exact same story for this song, too. Different show, different spec script. This one actually got into CBS. They didn't accept the script overall. It was bought in the same batch that The Good Wife came out of. But I actually made some money on that script. And it was written to this song.
Well, thank you, Kotaro Fuma, for giving you some money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, that's what we're going with.
That's what we're going with. He's a bandit that works backwards. Good on him. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, no,
I can definitely see more easily how this could help picture scene and get your imagination working and babbling.
Yeah.
It flows very naturally. It's very apt. I mean,
the composer who goes by...
good song from a Capcom game.
Yeah, the composer who goes by T's Music, T''S Music, is very good at this sort of song and has several throughout Sengoku Basara 2, whose soundtrack I have heard sight unseen, and this game.
All right.
They know what they're doing. This T's Music. Then again, you never know when these sorts of composers will come back out of the woodwork. We talked about 99 Nights. We talked about Peter Toprok, who was the lead composer for 99 Nights, coming back out of nowhere to compose that Avatar game that got nominated for... I think that one was for a Grammy. So, you never know when they might make a comeback.
Indeed. Although this could be more of a rebranding, given that this seems to be the recording studio more than the individual composers, which are listed on VGMDB, thankfully.
Aha!
And these have more recent work.
Yeah, as a song, this one just flows great. It's got a really great energy. It's really aggressive in the best possible way. When you hear this boss theme and you see this boss intro, you know you're going to be up for a fight.
Absolutely.
And for the record, I like this Kotaro way better than Samurai Warriors 2's version. Like, way better.
Yeah, like, they have some great characters when it comes to the Samurai versions of them, but Kotaro never really stuck to me.
I would also rather have Sengoku Basara's Crazy Pants Mitsunari than the one we ended up with in Samurai Warriors, I'll be honest there. I like the scary
less
guy
set
way
on
better.
that, but that's because he was my entry point in Samurai Warriors as a whole.
I understand. I started with the first game, so my entry point was by default Yukimura.
Yeah.
So I get it.
No, he was in the opening selection, and I saw man who hit people with a fan. I said, sign me up.
I've never been down with his moveset, I will be honest about that, but that's, again, a whole other
It
conversation.
wasn't great, there's a lot of better movesets around, but the first one leaves a mark. I know I started with him, and I know I started with Sun Xiang in Dynasty Warriors 3.
My first clear is Dynasty Warriors 2 with Shahodo, and, I'm already starting to run Podao in Dynasty Warriors Origins, so that sure hasn't changed.
What I appreciate about doing this Warriors episode is that there's just so many personal stories. I mean that happened last time as well, and it's very much a variation on a theme here. But honestly, if there's one kind of video game series or topic we can afford to do slight iteration on a same theme with variation that appear irrelevant from the outside but very much matter for those that care, is the Warrior series.
Now, this next one is, again, for me, a very loud explain please, because
Yes.
I need to understand where you're coming from on this one.
Well, where I'm coming from is, again, this idea that the Musou games are a branch of PS2 style action games. One of those action games being the first Yakuza, which then got more RPG to the point where it became just an RPG on the main line, but then keeps the action gameplay through its spin-offs, most recently Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. And the one before that, Man Who Erased His Name, initiated what that part of the Gaiden spin-offs specifically has, which is more enemies. In general encounters already, and then further still when it comes to the big arena fights. And with a focus more on amount of adversity over strategic maneuvering across wide battlefields, this felt like the closest this franchise in particular, the Yakuza franchise or Like a Dragon franchise, got to being a Musou game. It felt close enough that I wouldn't put other previous game on the side of the line where I'd say this is kind of a Musou-like. Most of the game are not. I would say Man Who Erased His Name's Colosseum specifically, not even the outside fight, but the Colosseum where you're fighting a whole mass of people with your own allies, that part is important too.
Yeah, okay.
That one is just on the other side of the line to me.
I am a little dubious, given that the Colosseum situation is, while there is certainly a tactical element, it does not have the sprawling stage aspect, but this is a lot closer than... Yeah, no, the way you describe it, I'm willing to hear that argument, even if I don't necessarily agree.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I wouldn't call it a Musou as a whole, but this is as close as they're going to get in that specific section, which would probably have been closer if it was more fleshed out, if it had more fights than the one it had, and more diversity, especially in the level progression. Like, if you had a blend of the Colosseum stages with the dungeons from Ishin, that would have counted even more.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But what I will say is interesting is that given that this is a condensed Musou experience in this one specific point. Like, this feels like a single encounter in a broader Musou stage, and the music feels condensed as well, in that they just got all of the action and barely let it wriggle. It's completely explosive, and the electronic elements on top of the strumming guitars give a bit of a city-destroying robot army vibe.
A city-destroying robot army vibe. Okay, interesting. I am going to be honest, this is a song that, like, it starts cool, and then it goes full dubstep, and I lose all interest, and then some black metal synths come in and kind of fix the problem, and then it just... This one is, I would say, the most musically confusing song to me. Like, even outside of my genre quasi-disagreement, like, this song just... I feel like this would give me a headache on casual listens.
Yeah, I figure that. It's... Like I said, it feels like a condensed version of a track, even with taking into account the fact that they're obviously going for some very fast action guitars, at least as the hook, but then they're going to these more electronic places and these things, and they're going a little bit everywhere. It's a bit of a scramble, and I don't think it's all deliberate stage setting.
I don't think so either. It sounds like it sounds like it was composed for just like the hiree was like, go write a crazy song, and they did, and they fit it in the game later. Is the vibe I get from this song.
Yeah, and I could definitely see a version of this song that would be more cohesive while still being super intense after like 2 or 3 additional passes of Love, Thunder, and Care.
Yeah.
But in a way, this, more than some of the gameplay aspects and presentation aspects, which feel very polished, even though this is a spin-off game, the music for this track feels more like it felt the pinch in a way. While still having, like, it's got heart, if nothing else.
It has that. Like, this composer was clearly not not turning in their C game on this one. They threw everything at the wall. I'm not sure it all landed, but the effort is clearly evident.
It has energy, but no real direction.
That's a really good way to put it. Which is a great way to describe the Like a Dragon franchise as a whole. Sorry, I had to.
I know, right?
I had to.
No, speak your truth. You are correct and you should say it.
Okay, fine then. Not a joke.
But not say it too much, because we have another podcast for that.
Yeah, and we're going to have to schedule that one. I haven't even started this game yet.
And I have, along with other game we're going to talk about in Music Arcade, now playing. But yeah, I'm not going to put in tracks from Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, because most of the discussion I want to keep to that part of the podcast, plus I don't want to spoil you on that.
Fair enough.
But I'm having a good time so far. I will say as much. Musically and overall, I'm having a very good time.
Cool.
So yeah, aside from that, most of the games that I've been playing have continuations of games I've already talked about. Like, I think I talked about Rebirth and Civ 7 in last episode already. There was a Hades 2 update that dropped, but I haven't reached the new area yet because I barely played a couple of runs, which met an unfortunate and violent end before I could get to the new places. So the one new real track was due to a complete surprise drop. which was Monster Train 2. Last I heard, the Monster Train team worked on Inkbound, and I had quite a bit of fun. I really liked that game, although it felt like a game that wanted more regular updates to really get some space going. But if they held back on the live update schedule to work on Monster Train 2, honestly, I'm not complaining because Monster Train was super fun, and so far from the demo they dropped right at the reveal, it's looking like a fun time here too. And this track, Fallen Angel Anthem, goes pretty hard. There's another track that goes even harder. They have remakes of all the tracks from the previous games. It's musically a bit too diverse for its own good at times. Like, it goes in too many directions in a single run. Well, not so much many directions as paces and levels of intensity for doing the same thing when it comes to gameplay, but it's still good tracks taken individually, and yeah, I had a good time in my couple of runs I played of the demo, and I'm looking forward to more information when they'll release the full version of Monster Train 2.
Okay.
Oh, what have you been playing? Oh, nice, interesting.
Yeah, okay. Well, on the subject of roguelikes, the 5th iteration of Integrated Strategies just released.
Nice.
So
I should catch a couple of streams of that. They're always a fun watch.
Yep. So Sarkaz Ferticide Tales is out, and it's exploring alternate universes of alternate timelines of one of the principal, I don't want to call them problematic factions because that's untrue, but definitely a source of a lot of tension.
Cool.
So that's neat. Playing Dynasty Warriors Origins, which does have original tracks, but it also has remixes of older tracks. In that way, the soundtrack styling sounds a lot like Samurai Warriors 5. For better or worse.
And I imagine it's like, I only really played the demo, but it sounded like they felt more free to go wild with it, at least.
Yeah.
On the musical aspect.
Yeah. I'm not super sold on it, but the remixes have been decent so far. Like,
I've liked what I heard.
Yeah, I've liked what I've heard. Don't love it, but I like it. And finally, after a whole lot of technical difficulties, I started playing the actual Christmas special winner, which was XCOM Enemy Unknown, which has a deeply unmemorable Western soundtrack.
Yeah, it's strange. Like right, I remember my brother calling it fireman music. Because
Fireman
it's very
music.
much pum 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 pum, we're going to save the day. It's kind of that.
Oh yeah. That's a
bit
really cool way of putting it.
A bit simple in its energy, like a popcorn action movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I buy that.
Yeah. But I have a bit of a fondness, like, for all the unmemorable aspect of the track, surprisingly, at least it doesn't get old when you're in like 40 hours in a run and it's your 40th mission, and this track kind of still goes by without getting old.
I picked this one out of a hat at random. I can barely tell the difference between the songs. I know that's a cruel thing to say, but it's just like,
well,
I just
this
have
one
no
I
interest.
recognize especially because it's also one of the tracks that's present on the application for the XCOM board game, which I have at home and appreciate dearly. It manages to use board game systems to capture the risk-reward aspect of the game wonderfully.
I absolutely believe that XCOM would work really well as a board game.
It's super fun.
Yeah, that what you just said makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And they have a companion app to manage like the surprise events and make sure that no to run are perfectly predictable, which is integral to the essence of the game, and that's why I recognize the music from that as well, even though I probably play way more XCOM 2 than XCOM Enemy Unknown. And I probably played more XCOM Apocalypse than that, but that's a different kind of era entirely.
Right. And with that, I think we are at the end of our episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been a fun little exploration of the Musos that aren't, and some similar enough and inspired by scenarios.
Yeah, Musou adjacent at least.
Yeah.
In the periphery. If you take enough heights, you're going to see some of those games. You can wave at them. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.
See you next time, everybody.
And the cut.